Thank you for listening to Inspiring Towards God podcast.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we're doing a deep dive into, a really fascinating book, the Book of Daniel and its prophecies.
It's definitely one that sparks a lot of discussion.
Absolutely. And for this, we've pulled together quite a range of sources, insights from YouTube discussions, some detailed theological articles, classic Bible commentaries, and even looked at what historical figures like St. Jerome had to say.
Right, getting that broad perspective is key, I think, from ancient interpreters to modern scholars.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really unpack the core insights from all these materials. We want to look at Daniel's prophecies, understand the history behind them, and, touch on what they might suggest about the future.
All while keeping it clear and hopefully engaging for you listening.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. The history. Our sources place Daniel's exile to Babylon around 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar's siege of Jerusalem.
It's quite the dramatic start, isn't it? A young man, likely nobility, suddenly transported into this powerful foreign empire. And what stands out immediately, something all our sources highlight, is his commitment, his faith, right from the get-go.
That's crucial. Refusing the king's food, continuing to pray towards Jerusalem. These weren't small things in that context. They were acts of deep conviction.
Acts of resistance, almost.
In a way, yes, against immense cultural pressure. Yeah. And the fact that the chief official showed him sympathy, that's often seen as God's favor already at work.
One commentary did mention a small point of discussion, the precise dating of Nebuchadnezzar's arrival in Daniel versus Jeremiah.
Yes. Those kinds of details often come up in biblical scholarship. The general consensus leans towards Daniel marking that initial siege, the start of the exile period. It reminds us texts can have layers.
So the early chapters really establish Daniel's character, his integrity.
Precisely. And that foundation, his personal relationship with God, is so important for understanding how he receives and interprets the prophecies later on.
Which brings us neatly to Nebuchadnezzar's dreams. These are absolutely central, aren't they? Especially the big one in chapter 2.
The giant statue dream, yes. Revealing that succession of world empires, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, culminating in God's eternal kingdom.
And what our sources really emphasize here is that Daniel didn't just figure this out. It was revealed to him after prayer.
Right. A direct demonstration of God intervening, revealing his plan. It's a powerful statement about divine knowledge and sovereignty right there.
And interestingly, this dream presents world history from, a human viewpoint maybe. A magnificent statue, powerful empires.
That's a great point, because later in Daniel 7, Daniel has his own vision of these same powers.
It's quite different.
Very different. He sees them as wild, terrifying beasts emerging from the sea.
So what's the significance of that contrast? The statue versus the beasts?
Well, many commentaries suggest the statue is how humans might see these empires grand, imposing. But the beasts, that's perhaps God's perspective. It highlights the often brutal, rapacious nature of earthly power when it's not aligned with him.
That really makes you think about how power is viewed, doesn't it? Now, even after Nebuchadnezzar is impressed by Daniel's interpretation of the statue dream, he doesn't stay focused on God for long.
No, he lapses back. We get the story of the giant golden statue he builds, an act of immense pride and idolatry.
Leading to that incredibly dramatic scene with the fiery furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refusing to bow.
Their faithfulness is astounding, and their miraculous deliverance walking out of the furnace untouched. It forces Nebuchadnezzar again to acknowledge the power of their God.
But it seems like a temporary acknowledgement again.
It often is with human rulers in these accounts. It highlights God's power to protect the faithful, but also the persistent struggle with pride and idolatry. It makes you wonder about the furnaces we face, pressures to compromise.
Then comes Nebuchadnezzar's own major humbling, his period of madness.
Yes, the 7 periods often interpreted as years living like an animal, directly linked in the text to his overwhelming pride. Is not this great Babylon which I have built?
A really stark illustration of God opposing the proud. But he is eventually restored.
He is. And importantly, upon his restoration, he offers genuine praise to God, acknowledging his everlasting dominion and sovereignty. It's a powerful narrative arc within the book.
A crucial lesson about pride and divine authority.
Absolutely.
Okay, so after Nebuchadnezzar, we move to Belshazzar in chapter 5.
His successor, though the exact relationship is debated by historians, what's clear is his attitude.
Total disrespect, it seems, using the sacred vessels looted from the Jerusalem temple for a drunken feast.
It's presented as a deliberate act of blasphemy, and the consequence is immediate and supernatural.
the writing on the wall. Mene, tekel, upharsin, chillin' stuff.
And who can interpret it? Only Daniel. And he doesn't hold back.
No, he's incredibly bold. He reminds Belshazzar of what happened to Nebuchadnezzar, his pride and humbling, and condemns Belshazzar for not learning the lesson.
His courage is remarkable, speaking truth to power like that. The interpretation essentially declares the king's reign is over, judged and found wanting, and his kingdom will be divided.
And the fulfillment is swift. That very night, Belshazzar is killed, and Darius the Mede takes over,
signifying the fall of Babylon and the rise of the Medo-Persian Empire, just as the earlier prophecies indicated. A very direct display of God's judgment.
So that brings us to Daniel's own visions, starting in chapter 7.
Yeah.
You mentioned this earlier, contrasting with Nebuchadnezzar's dream.
Right. This is where we get what some sources call progressive revelation. The same basic timeline of kingdoms, but with, let's say, more detail and a different emphasis.
Instead of a statue, we get 4 beasts from the sea.
Yes. A lion, often linked to Babylon. A bear, representing Medo-Persia. A leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, pointing to Greece under Alexander and its division after his death.
And the 4th beast.
That one's described as simply terrifying, dreadful, and exceedingly strong, with iron teeth. It's generally understood to represent the Roman Empire. It's distinct, more destructive, perhaps.
So the progressive revelation idea is that Daniel 7 adds what exactly?
It adds character, maybe, the nature of these empires, their ferocity. But crucially, Daniel 7 introduces the heavenly court scene.
The Ancient of Days.
Exactly. Taking a seat on the throne. And then one, like a son of man, approaches the Ancient of Days.
And he's given dominion.
Everlasting dominion, glory, and a kingdom that will never be destroyed. This shifts the focus dramatically from the rise and fall of earthly empires to the ultimate eternal triumph of God's kingdom.
That's a huge addition compared to the statue dream. It points towards, well, something much bigger.
Precisely. It introduces this figure, the Son of Man, receiving eternal authority. It makes you contemplate the nature of God's everlasting kingdom versus temporary human ones.
Okay, let's tackle chapter 9, the 70 weeks prophecy. This one comes up a lot.
It does, and it originates from Daniel's own study and prayer. He's reading Jeremiah's prophecy about the 70 years of captivity nearing their end, and he prays for understanding and restoration.
And the angel Gabriel appears.
Yes, with a message that expands the timeline dramatically. Not just 70 years, but 70 weeks are decreed for Daniel's people and the holy city.
Generally interpreted as 70 weeks of years, right? 490 years.
That's the common interpretation, yes. And Gabriel outlines 6 specific goals for this period. Things like finishing transgression, ending sin, atoning for iniquity,
bringing in everlasting righteousness, sealing vision and prophecy, and anointing a most holy place or person. It sounds incredibly comprehensive.
It points to a complete work of redemption and restoration. The prophecy itself is then broken down
into 7 weeks, then 62 weeks, and then a final 1 week.
Correct. And there's significant debate among scholars about the starting point for counting these weeks. Was it the decree of Cyrus to rebuild the temple, or a later decree by Artaxerxes regarding the rebuilding of Jerusalem's walls?
And depending on the starting point, the timeline shifts.
Exactly. But the prophecy clearly speaks of an anointed one, a Messiah, appearing after the 69 weeks, 7 plus 62.
And
then the Messiah will be cut off, but not for himself. This is widely seen, especially in Christian interpretation, as pointing to the crucifixion of Jesus.
And following that, the prophecy speaks of the people of a coming ruler destroying the city and the sanctuary,
which aligns strikingly with the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple by the Romans in 70 AD. Jesus himself seems to reference Daniel when predicting these events, like in Matthew 24.
But that final 70th week, there's still a lot of discussion about that, isn't there? Whether it's been fulfilled or is yet future.
Absolutely. That final week, often associated with a covenant being made and then broken and the cessation of sacrifice, is a major focus of different eschatological views. The timing and nature of its fulfillment are definitely key points of interpretation.
Okay, moving into the later chapters, 10 through 12, the visions seem to get even more detailed and maybe more symbolic.
They do. Chapter 10 starts with another angelic appearance to Daniel, described in quite stunning, vivid imagery. And the angel explains he was delayed.
Delayed by what?
By a spiritual battle. He mentions being withstood by the prince of the kingdom of Persia for 21 days until Michael, described as one of the chief princes, came to help him.
So this gives us a glimpse behind the curtain, so to speak, into spiritual warfare influencing earthly events.
That's how it's often interpreted, yes. A spiritual dimension underlying the conflicts of nations.
And then the angel reveals detailed prophecies about future conflicts.
Primarily conflicts between the king of the south and the king of the north. Historically, these are often identified with the Ptolemaic dynasty ruling Egypt, south, and the Seleucid dynasty ruling Syria, north, successors to Alexander the Great's empire.
So these chapters seem to predict specific historical clashes quite accurately.
Many scholars see remarkable correspondences with the historical struggles between those dynasties. Particularly prominent is the figure who arises from the north, often identified with Antiochus V Epiphanes.
He was the Seleucid king who severely persecuted the Jews in the 2nd century BC.
Yeah.
Right, desecrated the temple.
Exactly. He's seen by many as a historical fulfillment of parts of this prophecy, and also, significantly, as a type or foreshadowing of the ultimate Antichrist figure expected in the end times.
So these historical fulfillments might also point towards future events.
That's a common interpretive approach, yes, that figures like Antiochus are patterns for a final future fulfillment.
And chapter 12 really seems to focus on that ultimate end.
It does. It speaks of a time of trouble, such as never has been since there was a nation till that time, but also a promise of deliverance for God's people.
And resurrection.
Yes, explicitly. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. A clear statement of future resurrection and judgment.
The book also mentions sealing up the words until the time of the end. What's that about?
It suggests the full understanding might be reserved for a later time, closer to the fulfillment. Coupled with the idea that knowledge shall increase, it's quite intriguing.
There's also that phrase, time, times, and half a time.
Another key prophetic time marker, often interpreted as 3.5 years, and frequently linked in end-time scenarios to the period of the Antichrist's reign, or the Great Tribulation.
Tied in with the abolishment of the daily sacrifice and the setting up of the abomination of desolation, themes that echo back to Antiochus, but also point forward.
Exactly. These are recurring motifs in prophetic interpretation, linking historical events with future expectations. And finally, Daniel himself is given a personal promise.
To rest, and then stand in his allotted place at the end of the days.
A promise of his own resurrection and inheritance in God's kingdom.
So, after diving through all this, the history, the dreams, the visions, the prophecies, what are the big takeaways, the core themes from Daniel that resonate across these different sources we looked at?
Well, I think number one has to be the absolute sovereignty of God over kings, over the empires, over history itself. That comes through so powerfully.
Definitely. And tied to that, the importance of unwavering faithfulness, even when everything seems against you. Daniel and his friends are prime examples.
Absolutely. Their courage is a constant theme. Then there's the reliability of God's word, his prophecies. Seeing how intricately detailed they are and how interpreters have seen them fulfilled builds confidence in his promises.
And the stark contrast between the temporary, often brutal nature of human kingdoms and the lasting righteous nature of God's eternal kingdom.
Yes, that contrast is fundamental. Plus, the foreshadowing. Daniel clearly points towards the coming Messiah, the Son of Man, and gives us glimpses into future end-time events.
It's also a call, isn't it? To stand firm in faith even when culture pulls you in other directions.
Without a doubt. And perhaps most importantly for us today, it's an encouragement to trust God's control, his ultimate plan, especially when times feel uncertain or chaotic.
So, summing it all up, our deep dive into Daniel, using all these varied sources, really paints this incredible picture of God's grand plan playing out through history. From Babylon right through to the promise of his eternal kingdom. It highlights faithfulness and, above all, God's complete sovereignty.
Thank you for listening to Inspiring Towards God podcast. And maybe a final thought for you to consider, how can those powerful themes we've talked about, God's ultimate control over everything, and the call to steadfast faith like Daniel's Phelan, how can they give you guidance, maybe strength, and real hope as you navigate your own life, your own challenges today?
Thank you for listening to Inspiring Towards God podcast.
Happy, happy, happy.